2. History.
I hope you'll all recall our lively discussion of Renaissance art from last week. We talked about such artists as Botticelli and Da Vinci, who really characterized the Renaissance through their artwork. Art, however, is not created in a vacuum. Art is a reflection of the world, through the eyes of the artist. So, what was going on in the world to inspire such great art? Well, that's the topic of today's lecture. We're going to talk about the intellectual and social movement that underlay the Renaissance. The movement was called humanism. So, what is humanism? Let's go back to the word Renaissance. As we talked about last time, the word means rebirth. And that's just what humanism was. It was a revival of antiquity. Antiquity, in this case, refers to the classic civilizations of Greece and Rome. Now, following the fall of the Roman Empire, we had about 1,000-odd years in which, well, nothing of note in the art world really happened. These we call the Middle Ages. The dominant school of thought during the late Middle Ages was called scholasticism. That's scholastic, like school-related things, plus ism. Scholasticism. A large part of humanism, the new idea in the Renaissance, was its rejection of scholasticism. The humanists felt that the scholastics were focusing too much on the church. So, the humanists were rejecting the predominant intellectual school in favor of the classics. The humanists studied the classical civilizations of ancient Greece and Rome and applied what they learned to their current society. It's not that the scholastics didn't know about the classics. They just tried to analyze them in such a way that the classics agreed with the church. That was their whole purpose, to find ways to reconcile Greek and Roman philosophy with Christian theology. In the minds of the humanists, society had been going in the wrong direction since the fall of the Roman Empire. Not that they wanted to return to those times, but they felt that more could be learned from antiquity than from anything that had happened since. It was this revival of old ideas that changed the way that European people in the late Middle Ages thought. Humanist thinkers started to create new kinds of art and literature. They even changed the way societies thought about education, law, and, well, everything. Simply put, humanism was the basis of the Renaissance. Now, as you may know, Renaissance thought started in Italy and spread to the rest of Europe. Most of the painters that we talked about yesterday, in fact, were Italian. But why Italy? The answer may surprise you. It was because of Latin. Remember, the humanists were looking back to the ancient civilizations. Much of their writings would have been done in Latin, right? Now, Italy was the only place where Latin was still studied outside of the church. As for the rest of Europe, only the clergy learned Latin because it was considered the language of the church and didn't really have any other use. So, it seems only natural that these Italian Latin speakers would be the initiators of a review of classic literature. If we want to point to one person who began the humanist movement, it would have to be Petrarch. In case you don't know, Petrarch was an Italian poet who was influenced by Cicero. Cicero, of course, was a famous politician in the final years of the Roman Republic. So what Petrarch did was translate a lot of Cicero's correspondence, letters to different people, and he also tried to imitate Cicero's style in his own Latin writing. Petrarch's revival of the teachings of Cicero was really what began the humanist movement, which of course spread from Italy throughout Europe. Now, some of the social factors that existed in Italy at this time are important to note. You see, Italy at this time consisted of two republics, Florence and Venice. However, there were neighboring states that were not republics, but instead were under despotic rule. Some of these despotic states were interested in taking over the republics, so the people of Florence and Venice felt threatened. Petrarch was from Florence. Now, it's a common occurrence that when a state feels threatened, its people tend to feel patriotic. It's kind of like a defense mechanism. So, feeling threatened, the intellectuals in Florence followed Petrarch's lead and began to appreciate the past. Florence had a rich history, and people wanted to celebrate it. Those outside pressures were fanning the flames of patriotism.
Number 1. What is the professor talking about? Number 2. What is the main idea of the talk?
Number 3. Which two statements are true? Choose two answers.
Number 4. Why does the professor say this?
Much of the writings would have been done in Latin, right?